If you're determined to age well, then you, my friend, are in the right place because that's why we're here, to age well. Bloody well, in fact. Welcome to the Aging Project podcast. I'm Shelley Craft, your host and fellow ager. And in each episode, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to age well, learning from experts around the world and, of course, from each other. Why? Because aging well doesn't just happen, my friends, and each of us needs and deserves a support team. So you can think of us as your tribe or perhaps your cheerleaders. We're here to stand by your side, to propel you forward and spark yes you can choices at every age. We'd love for you to join our growing community. In fact, we're calling it a movement. And of course, try our free 5-day morning challenge over at theagingproject.com. It is a great place to start your aging journey. And this is a great place to kick off today's episode. Brought to you by youmusttryit.com, where you'll find supplements, skincare, and makeup. We've tried it, we've tested it, and we love it. And it's all in one place.
I know one lady in particular, actually, she's a friend, who really was having issues with her weight management, and she had a pretty good diet. In fact, the reason I know her is we went to the same gym, and she just couldn't manage that last 5 to 10 kilos that she was concerned about. She did actually do a FitGenes test, and what she found was she actually couldn't tolerate carbs. And so she was able to just change some really simple lifestyle interventions, some changes to her diet and some changes to when she ate, and those 5 to 10 kilos came off.
Today, we're talking about genes. That's right, your unique genetic code and why understanding your blueprint can help you to age well. This is a topic that we have already touched on here at the Aging Project, firstly with Dr. Yael Joffe and, of course, Dr. Frank Lipman. And as a side note, I do suggest you go back and listen to those episodes again if you want to learn more after you hear today's conversation. But since our conversation with Yael, many of you message us asking where can we get our genes tested and who do I trust to do it? I'm thrilled to say today we have got the answer. Please welcome to the podcast, Darren from FitGenes. Darren, it's great to have you with us.
Hi, Shelley. Thanks a lot for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's a great subject and a great opportunity to have a chat.
Well, I know it is a subject very close to your heart, obviously, because you work strongly in this area. And I am just so excited about our collaboration, of course, with FitGenes and the Aging Project. But this is a topic I'm absolutely fascinated about. Let's start, of course, with a little refresher. What is a gene and our genetic code?
Actually, it's a really interesting question, and the answer varies depending on who you ask and how they answer it. But look, it's just the simplest building block that makes up who we are. So it's the simplest piece of information that makes up who we are. And I think, as we all know, we've all seen the double helix, and DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. Everybody learns that in high school, and no one remembers what it means or why.
It's that weird little twisted chain that we see behind you there, isn't it? That's what we know. We know it looks like that.
Absolutely. And your genes are a part of that, and they're responsible usually for making something or doing something. And typically it'll make an enzyme that'll do something. So it might make an enzyme that helps you process a vitamin, or make a enzyme or a receptor that helps process some other function in the body. So they're really there just to provide the building block that makes us up, but then also the code. So you sometimes hear about it, talk like the DNA code, the code to do things in the body. So, and that's what we're interested in. We're interested in looking at your code and seeing what's in there.
So the basic things we would know, obviously, me, blue eyes, blonde hair, that is part of my genetic makeup. We've all seen the ads on TV for ancestry, tests that you can do to find out what is part of your ancestral genetic makeup. But what FitGenes does is dives to that next level, really, doesn't it? It's not about our aesthetics. It's about how our body goes about doing the job that it does, and whether it does that well, or, as you and I have spoken about, that idea of a mutation or a dysfunction. We don't really like to call it that so much anymore, do we?
You're right, it is a mutation, but actually the term we use is a variation. That's actually the scientific term, really, that people are using more commonly. And yeah, you're right. So we've all got the genetics, and as we've discussed before, there might be little variations that make us different. And actually, a classic one you just said, because everyone can see it immediately when you meet someone, is eye color. Eye color, there's just that variation in a couple of positions on your genome that'll change how your eyes reflect color. And so there are others, of course, around genetic variations globally. And that's how ancestry companies do that. They look at a list of genetic variations that are common to a certain type of people or from a certain area, and they'll look for those commonalities. And we sort of look a little deeper than that. So we're looking for some of those errors, some of those variations that'll actually change your health outcomes, particularly if they're not tracked, if you're not looking after them. So we use a classic example, which is actually, there'll be a couple of long words that we don't need to remember while we have a chat today, but there's one, it's called PAI1. There's a gene that controls, it's called plasminogen activation inhibitor 1. Okay, so really not very interesting. We won't remember the name. But if you've got a variation or this particular variation in that gene, your chance of having a stroke or having a heart attack or having ischemic issues are much, much higher than the regular population, really significant, 30 to 50% higher.
Wow. And this will show up from before you're born, like your genetic code is set from day one.
Yep.
So this is something that you can see that you have a a variation in.
Yeah.
And although you can't change that, you can obviously change the way you go about your daily living to prevent or to help your chances of not having a stroke, right?
Yeah, so what we talk about intervention. So you have a lifestyle intervention or you'll have a nutritional intervention or a supplement or something like that. And actually that one's a classic because if you take 4 to 6 grams of fish oil a day, so just a normal omega-3 fish oil that you can buy from stores, that'll actually reduce your risk level back to the normal population. Now, it doesn't take the risk away. It just makes you gives you the standard risk that everybody has. So it's a way that you can manage the risk in your future of having either a cardiovascular event or a stroke or those kind of issues. So really useful little small intervention that doesn't impact your life.
That's phenomenal information because we all hear again that fish oil is great for everybody. So is it something that you should only really be supplementing if you have this variation in your PAI1, or is it something that's good for everyone no matter what your genetic makeup?
Yeah, in my personal view, I think fish oil is something that most people should be taking unless their doctor indicates that they don't like blood thinning problems or something like that. But really, no, fish oil is a great one. But what this sort of tells you is that while there's sort of this motherhood statement that fish oil is good, for you, not you personally, for one who has that variation, it's really important. You really want to be making sure you get your fish oil and you eat oily fish and you eat salmon once a week. And these are just small interventions you can make that actually can really impact your life.
Incredible. And this is what we call biohacking, isn't it? Once you know this sort of stuff about yourself, and I think this is even, it's just as important to me as my star sign, as, of course, you say, your ancestry and getting to know your own personality, is getting to know your own genetic makeup can make huge differences to your longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do and what we'll be collaborating with you on, of course, and we're really looking forward to it, is actually what we can do is take an individual's a sample of their genes and go and have a big look through, and we look at genes around health and wellness and fitness and lifestyle and weight management and all those kind of things. And we look through their inflammation risk and their fat metabolism and their ability to detoxify and their risk of dairy intolerance and gluten intolerance. And we run through and we can provide that information to their practitioner, naturopath, dietitian, doctor, to provide them the best advice to help them go forward and manage those risks. Like I said, it doesn't take them away. What it does is helps you manage them for long-term wellness.
So my body is going to tell me everything I need to know. I just have to listen. Obviously, we've heard about certain genes like the BRCA gene, for example. So that would be a variation in some people in that particular gene strand.
Absolutely. So, and obviously the reason you brought it up is there's quite a lot of publicity around the BRCA gene, particularly BRCA1, as a predisposition to breast cancer, of course. So, that actually isn't a gene that we report on for patients, primarily because that's such a medical setting and you really need genetic counsellors, and you want to do that through a diagnosis with a medical professional. But it's basically it's on the same spectrum of decision making. It's looking at your body and, as you said, listening to what's in there to help you make lifestyle decisions, particularly around, as we age. I mean, you don't appear to be, but I'm aging. And so
good lighting, Darren. It's the key to everything.
Yeah, so as we go through life, we want to manage our inflammation. We want to make sure that we can get up and down really easily without making horrible noises, or we want to make sure we can still exercise and walk. And we want to manage our long-term weight and fitness and all those kind of good things. And so that's what we aim to do with our patients.
If you heard about a product that interests you in today's show, please head over to youmusttryit.com. This is our sister platform and Australia's home of Aging Well. You might be interested to know we also have a subscription option on all our products because we know you're busy. So this means you can organise to have your favourite products delivered as often as you need them. Just go to youmusttryit.com for 10% off your first order. So what else do you test for there, or what genes do you look for specifically in a and I love the name of your company, in a FitGene kind of way? What is it that you guys are seeking out?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And despite saying FitGenes, we mean about as in fit and healthy, not fitness. So we're not a fitness company. We're not a weight loss company. We're looking at providing long-term health and wellness advice to help people age well. And so we actually typically think about starting with inflammation. So inflammation is a classic one because, again, as we age, it becomes more important to manage inflammation and make sure we have those, everyone's had that experience of going to the gym or going for a walk. Like going up Mount Cootha or your local hills or whatever. And maybe up to 2 days later, you've got that post-exercise muscle soreness still maybe 2 or 3 days later. And that's a strong indication of potentially a predisposition to inflammation. So what we're going to be doing is looking for interleukin 6 is a classic IL-6. So that's a gene that's responsible for the production of inflammatory cytokines. And they are the things that hang around. And that they're actually... Inflammation can be a good thing because it's there to fight disease, and if you get an infection or something like that, and inflammation goes to the spot and makes it hot and kills the bugs. But really, we don't want that on all the time. So chronic inflammation is something we look for, and that's where you've got a predisposition to having those genes switched on at all times. Interleukin 6 is one we look at. C-reactive protein is another one. So they're strong indicators of background inflammation that's going to be there, and it's going to affect it's going to affect that sort of muscle stiffness I just talked about, but it's also going to potentially leave you open to, Alzheimer's and other diseases that are a consequence of inflammation. Perhaps peripheral issues with your blood vessels that are going to potentially exacerbate problems with diabetes as people age. Inflammation's at the core of all of that, and obesity. I mean, people don't realise actually that obesity is actually an inflammatory condition. I mean, the fat cells actually produce inflammatory cytokines, and those inflammatory cytokines then promote actually the production of other fat cells. So you can actually be in a situation where inflammation is actually driving an obese condition rather than actually being a consequence of it.
Incredible. And so if we had this information when we were younger, we probably wouldn't have cared in our teens and maybe our early 20s. So now really is the time when I know that we're going to absorb this information and do something about it. But is it almost too late in our second half of life to go about doing our best for these particular variations? You mentioned there the obesity one, and I know you've got a personal story here.
Actually, yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm actually quite predisposed to obesity genetically, and we have a lot of diabetes in my family, and a lot of obese people. And I actually was quite an obese person as a young adult. And so this is actually before I found about biohacks and lifestyle choices that really can improve your life. And I did actually make conscious decisions. And this was actually prior to joining FitGenes. I actually made these conscious decisions to get healthier. And then on hearing about FitGenes, I said, I need to be a part of that. And I came on, and it was a really profound for me because I found that those genetic predispositions that I had are going to cause me issues long term. And it's going to leave me probably at least 5 or 6 times more prone to diabetes than other people based on one of my genetic conditions. So really want to get on top of that. So those choices I've made, I really, we love sharing those with other people because you can really make those choices. And it doesn't matter. It's never too late. I mean, you can, as I said, you can manage inflammation for healthy aging. You want to get down on the ground and play with the grandkids and get up again, or maybe just go for a run or go to the gym. But also people think, well, I'm young and healthy, I don't need all that. There's some of these things you can get on top of very early in your 20s and 30s if you know about these things I mentioned, stroke risk before. Stroke doesn't seem like a big risk if you're 25, but it's probably something you should be thinking about as you progress through life and say, look, what are my risks of inability to detoxify? Can I get rid of toxins? Maybe I shouldn't be drinking as much as I do. Maybe I shouldn't be smoking. There's a couple of genes that really respond to smoke, to cigarette smoke. And those people really shouldn't smoke. They have a much, much higher risk, for example, of developing lung cancer and other diseases from smoking, much more than the general population. It's good to find that out.
Well, it is incredible, isn't it? Because I guess in my grandparents' generation, you would hear of, my grandma had never had a cigarette in her life, but died of lung cancer because her husband did, and obviously that passive smoking, but maybe she had a genetic makeup that was more susceptible to it.
Absolutely. And the other sort of risks that it's great to know about. So, as I said before, there's a couple of motherhood statements. Eat healthily, get plenty of sleep, take some fish oil is probably a good thing. But for some people, those interventions, particularly some of them, are going to be really important. And there's a stage of your life where they're going to be more important than others. So, for example, I mentioned inflammation before, but there's others, detoxification. They're really important around pregnancy and conception, because there are people who might have minor variations in some of the enzyme processes around fertility. What we're going to find is, or what one might find is, if you're having issues with fertility, have a look at those pathways, and perhaps there's some nutritional supplement, something that's missing. Folate's a classic. Everyone knows you need folate, but there's a whole system in there of other vitamins, B12, B6, that can be necessary, and some people really don't process those very well.
As I said, I find this extraordinary knowledge that we can have about our own bodies. How long has this sort of testing been around? Obviously, we're going to talk in a moment about how easy the FitGenes test is to do for yourself at home. But are these tests something that medical professionals have had available to them for decades, or is this all relatively new? Obviously, again, when I was conceiving, there was a lot of my friends who were having trouble falling pregnant. And would they have undergone these sorts of gene testing at that time? I'm talking now, 15 years ago, or is this something that's relatively new for everybody?
Yeah, for some of these things it is relatively new, and these days, yes, a practitioner might recommend, a medical practitioner or other might recommend, these sorts of tests to look for those sort of issues, and they absolutely weren't available 15 years ago. I mean, FitGenes started in sort of 2006 in one of our versions, and so we were actually one of the earliest companies globally that were doing these sort of testing to make them available to the public. And the issue there was always expense. The first genome that was ever run cost several $1 billion. That was the genome project back in the late 90s and 2000. And now for a few $100s, you basically get most of what you need out of your genome. And it's quite incredible the amount of data that are now available to companies like us and to practitioners and to their patients to look for this information. So you're right, it's happened fairly rapidly, but it is now available to find at an accessible price to get a lot of information to help your health.
Unbelievable! I'm so excited. All right, let's talk about the actual process of a FitGenes test.
Yeah. So in the case we're talking about with yourselves, one of your clients, one of your
community, we call ourselves.
Your community. I'm looking for the word. One of your community who is interested. We can go through practitioners, their own existing practitioner if they've got one. But in reality, you need someone who's ideally done the FitGenes training, and I know your great nutrition staff have done some of that, and that's fantastic. So what we do, order the kit, and we'll have a discussion later about how that's available. Order the kit through you folks. It'll be sent straight out to people. It'll arrive in the post, really simple, with a video that shows how to do it. It's an at-home swab. It's looks a bit like the COVID test, but it's much easier. It doesn't go up your nose. It's just a little cotton swab in the mouth. Pop it back in the mail, and it comes straight to FitGenes. And within sort of about 3 weeks, that test will be available. The results will be available through the practitioner, through the nutritionist, and we'll have the results available. And like I said before, there'll be indications of the best dietary supplementation to help manage the risk of those long-term issues around inflammation. We're looking for the best drivers of weight management. We're looking for risks of gluten intolerance and dairy intolerance and even alcohol intolerance. And unfortunately, I'm one of those. So my test shows that I'm someone who doesn't tolerate alcohol very well. But that's good to know. So that information will be back real quick.
It's incredible. I did this test and it literally is, as Darren said, it's a swab on the inside of your cheek. There is nothing to it, a lot less invasive than a COVID test. It goes back in the tube, it gets sent to you. Now, Darren, I haven't got my results yet, and I will go through this with Lindsay, and we might even do it as a podcast live. But again, that comes back as a printout, doesn't it? Something that you can refer to all the time if you're particularly interested, or your practitioner will take you step by step through each of those variations that you may have. And as you said, then you've got, I guess, this blueprint about how you move forward with your own wellness and take control.
Well, absolutely. And so what your member of your community gets back, the patient gets back. They get back actually several reports. There's one on general health and wellness, and that's about living your life and with wellness and aging gracefully and healthily and all that sort of stuff. And then there's another one called food choice, which is included, and that's around food intolerances and alcohol intolerance, salt, and so on. Dietary choice, and perhaps we can talk about that in a minute. Dietary choice is about some of those drivers of it's not even really a weight loss product. It's about making the right dietary choices. And some people are, for example, they crave fat, and some people crave carbohydrates. And it's really looking for those issues that can help you make decisions in building a dietary plan. And also the immune health report, which looks for the risk of immune dysfunction. That can be very important for some people. It's not a COVID report, but it is actually giving you that feeling like, have I got issues around potentially managing infections or managing the risk of infection or managing the risk of poor immunity. And also we've got a couple of really exciting new reports that are going to be included there now, which is the fertility health report and also the fitness report around whether you're at risk of some of those inflammatory issues I said before, or recovery after exercise. So all of that, multiple reports, a couple of hundred gene analyses in there, multiple areas of health, and the practitioner can work with them to pluck out the stuff that's relevant to them.
Geez, I reckon this is just awesome. And I obviously it's not the same for myself or my daughters, and I think everyone should be getting this test done. Imagine if you could say to your kids, look, you might love soccer, but your genetic makeup is saying that your body is built for middle distance running, or you might really enjoy netball, but the wear and tear on your joints is going to be twice as bad for you as it would be for your sister. So I think, they should be doing this at birth. Our babies get their little hearing tests done. Why aren't we getting a genetic printout for our babies?
We do have people who have their children go through the program. We actually don't always recommend at birth, but we do actually. Some people find that a really useful information early on, and that can provide some lifestyle choices for their kids as they grow up. And actually, you have done the test, of course, so you remember the gene. There is a gene in there that people just, particularly it seems to be, I don't want to be sexist here, but the men always go straight to it. There's a gene in there that says, are you predisposed to being a long distance runner or a sprinter? And it's really these fast twitch genes that tell whether you're going to be good at cardiovascular or you're going to be good at lifting things. And we find people just run to the stuff that they're interested in. It's hilarious. But that can be useful information.
Yeah, I'm always one too to find an excuse or a reason for something, and I do say, it's not me, it's my genes. Like, I would love to have the brain capacity to sit down and study for hours, but my genetic makeup says that's just not how I work.
Yeah, my wife tells me I've got undiagnosed ADHD, but there's no genetic risk of that, I don't think.
Isn't there? Can you see something like that in your genes?
What we do is we report genes that meet several criteria, and one of those are clinical studies in humans, and clinical studies in humans that show that the patient can do something about it. So we're looking for things where we can have a look, give a patient intervention, and when they do that intervention, it has an impact on their life. And at this stage, the research hasn't been shown yet that there isn't enough research yet on what the interventions might be. So yes, you can actually have a look and see if people are predisposed to certain mental health conditions or cognition problems and those sort of things. But until we get enough information about intervention, so what can you do about it, we're actually not reporting those in the reports. But that is a medical test you can get through a doctor as well. Again, as I said before, there are some tests that are probably better off as a straight up medical diagnosis, where we track that individual with a genetic counsellor and a medical practitioner on site.
I understand, which makes perfect sense. But obviously there's been, these advances have come in leaps and bounds, and I imagine that this particular industry is just going bonkers at the moment, and there's going to be more and more and more. And I guess as a company, you will evolve your tests as that information becomes more available. On that, once you've done the test, is it retrospective? Like once new things become available, can you look back at the existing test, or would you have to redo another swab if there was new information?
No, that's a really good point. Obviously, your genes don't change, or they're not supposed to. So you only really need to do the genetic test once. What we do is, to the extent we're able to, when we release new reports, we generally go back and we're able to look in the data and look at those genes from the new report without the patient having to redo the data. So sometimes if we release a new report, there might be a small charge because there's a process that we have to go to. But the reality is there's no cost of the test again. And we really wanted to make sure that was possible. We don't want people having to outlay that test every single time we release a new report. So no, we make sure that the data is pretty much backward compatible, which is great.
Back in season 1, episode 12, we learned about the benefits of collagen from the amazing Dr. Frank Lipman. It was that conversation that saw us researching the best possible collagen products we could find for us and for you. I'm excited to say our favourite brands now available inside our sister platform and store, youmusttryit.com. You'll also find a range of fabulous products from gynecologist Dr. Anna Kebeka, who we interviewed in season 2. I absolutely love her maca powder and keto green protein power. After today's episode, perhaps go back and listen to episode 2. It's called Let's Take a Menu Pause with Dr. Anna Kebeka. It's worth a listen. Okay, my friends, now back to today's episode. Well, I think this is just an incredible innovation, a way that we can perhaps manage our own wellness journey. We can hopefully avoid and manage some chronic disease if we get onto it now and start using those preventatives, and can ultimately save a lot of money, because I know many of us are just supplementing for the sake of supplementing, and maybe that's not what our body particularly needs. So I think ultimately to sort of, I guess, come through the funnel and narrow this down to what I need as opposed to my husband or my sister or what my mum did is just mind-blowing to me. And I think it is such an incredible gift that we are able to now do this for ourselves. And again, for me, it's all coming down to owning your own health and managing your own health and taking responsibility for your wellness.
Absolutely. It is such a great point you just raised, actually. I mean, one of the things that we offer as one of the reports is actually going through all those genes, because you can get conflicting advice from a gene or even from a different genetic company. They'll look at a gene and make a different interpretation, or you'll have a gene that says you need to do one thing and you have a different gene that'll say you need to do a different thing. And so what we do is we actually help the practitioner by being able to categorize some of those interventions to find out what's the most important ones. Because as you say before, people can take hundreds of dollars of supplements a month, and they really might be actually literally flushing some of that money down the toilet. And in fact, you should be really looking at the ones that are going to be likely to give you the best outcome and the best benefit from that supplement. Or even an intervention. I mean, we talked on other occasions, we've talked about weight loss, for example, and there are a couple of classics, and we haven't talked about a lot of genes in detail today, but there are a couple of really interesting ones. There's one, melanocortin-4. I'm going off on a tangent, but there's one, melanocortin-4. It really controls food intake, and if people have got that little error, that variation, they are actually hungrier than other people, and they really crave fat. And so those people need to really get on a low-fat diet full of healthy carbs and healthy protein. But there's another gene, FTO it's called, and that one's really interesting. That also makes people hungry and helps you control your appetite, or not be able to control your appetite. But the response to that one is actually to have a relatively high-fat diet to increase your satiation so you feel full. And so that's actually totally different pieces of advice that almost conflict, or that do conflict with each other. So on balance, you need to go through and look at your whole dietary options and look at other genes that might also control weight loss and look at fat control and say, well, the diet that's most appropriate for me is probably going to be a relatively high protein diet, low on carbs or something like that. And actually, that's my diet. So that's how I know about it. Yeah, so that sort of advice you're going to miss if you just look at one gene in isolation. So we try and give the practitioner all those genes so they can rank them and give the best advice for the patient.
And that's why, as you say, it is so vital to go through this with your practitioner and someone that you can, work with on an ongoing basis too. When you do start to see those amazing changes, it must feel great for you. Obviously, having gone through this process yourself, but now seeing people who have made those lifestyle changes.
Oh yes, it's fantastic. I mean, we've got loads of case studies with practitioners, and we've got some lovely people who really couldn't manage some aspect of their lifestyle. I know one lady in particular, actually, she's a friend, who really was having issues with her weight management, and she had pretty good diet. In fact, the reason I know her is we went to the same gym, and she just couldn't manage that last 5 to 10 kilos that she was concerned about. She did actually do a FitGenes test, and what she found was she actually couldn't tolerate carbs. So she was getting that issue of blood sugar spikes, which produced insulin, which made a bit more of that weight. And so she was able to just change some really simple lifestyle interventions, some changes to her diet and some changes to when she ate. And she really did. Those 5 to 10 kilos came off. Now that's, obviously that's not guaranteed. There's personal responsibility and there's lifestyle decisions, but she was doing the right things and she couldn't quite get there. And there was actually a genetic reason in her case. So it's good to have a look for that sort of thing.
Absolutely, it is, Darren. And I know so many of our community are going to jump on board this. I really appreciate your time today. And of course, it is wonderful to be in association with FitGenes. We look forward to talking more about it in the future. Thanks very much.
Really looking forward to it. Thanks, Shelley, and all the best.
This conversation and the Aging Project's collaboration with FitGenes is something that we are thrilled about. It's an important step forward in our evolution of a company and our desire to support you aging well, which is why we're here in the first place. It means we're offering the best guests here on the podcast and now the best advances in longevity as well, the ones we're learning about from the very best companies. Of course, we also offer the best range of tried, tested and loved supplements, skincare and makeup over at youmusttryit.com. What we've learned about genetic testing is that it's not just about the test, it's the interpretation of the results that make all the difference, which is what makes FitGenes unique. It's only accessible via qualified and registered expert practitioners. For those ready and keen to get started with genetic testing, go and register at theagingproject.com, click on programs and FitGenes to sign up. Get to know your genes and take control of your health like never before. Together, let's unlock your genetic potential and your unique risk factors as well. Thanks once again for joining us. I'm Shelley Craft. And before you go, just a little reminder to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. It also helps us out more than you know. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week. A final thing before I go. If you enjoyed today's episode, can I ask 2 small things of you? Can I ask you to share it with someone you love? We would be so grateful for your support and help to spread the aging well message far and wide. We want everyone aging well alongside us. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing to the podcast, it helps more than you know and means you'll never miss an episode. Thank you so much. Until next time, I'm Shelley Craft, and this, my friends, has been another episode of The Aging Project. As always, the Aging Project podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. Always seek medical advice from a qualified practitioner.